So I'm not gonna say like, oh, I would recommend this book. Because I would recommend all of the books that I'm gonna try not to. I always move my hands. I'm sorry. But yes, I would recommend all of the books that I am gonna talk about. So just know that that's kind of implied. Hello and welcome to From the Spine to the Mind, where we talk about books. And today I'll be talking about the 10 books that helped me get back into reading. So I used to love to read as a kid, but once I got into the 6th grade, maybe the 5th grade, reading started to become a requirement, and I was just like heavily opposed to it. I did not like being told what books I had to read, whether or not I liked it or not, and that kind of just sucked the joy out of it for me. So in my hard-headed, stubborn ways as I was as a child, I decided just to stop reading altogether. It wasn't until about 2 years ago now that I decided to give it a try again. And like I said, these are the 10 books that helped me get back into it. I want to preface this by saying that I'm not really on social media all that much, like Book Talk, BookTube. I don't know what the Pinterest one is called. Bookpin? Maybe Bookpin? I don't know. But yes, I'm not really on social media, so a lot of these books, most of my books are thrifted. Like, the books up here with the stickers on them, all of those are thrifted, and I would say maybe 90% of the books up here are thrifted. So I just find my books by luck and at random. So I'm not really the type that likes to go with all of the trends. Don't get me wrong, I may read a trendy book here or there if someone suggested, or I don't know, if I just feel like it, but I kind of like to find those hidden treasures that not many people know about. So without further ado, we're just gonna get straight into the video. Okay, so the first book that I read was The Glass Castle, and ironically enough, this was a book I was supposed to read in high school, and as I mentioned, I stopped reading around the 6th grade. I'm sure I read like half a book, maybe? Yeah, I used to read like half the book before I just said, okay, I'm gonna go back to my old ways and Spark Noted. I was a Spark Notes kind of gal. If you don't know what Spark Notes is, you're really missing out. I don't think I could have gotten through Shakespeare without Spark Notes and the translations, because why are you talking like that? It was just something about the language that I just couldn't really get jiggy with, but that's just me. If you're a Shakespeare fan, good for you. Anyway, I'm sorry, I can kind of get lost on a tangent a bit, but The Glass Castle. I was supposed to read it in high school, and I just found it funny that I ended up loving this book. It was a great book. It ping-pongs between the past and the present. And in the past, you're following this young girl and her eccentric family as they're going on all of these crazy and more often than not, dangerous adventures. And there are these promises of building this glass castle from her father. And although her older siblings are telling her, like, almost like, grow up, dude, it ain't happening. Like, we've been around this block more times than you, we know it's not happening. But she was confident and just had all of this faith in her family that they would have this glass castle. And then it takes you to the present, where this young girl is now a successful, thriving adult in New York City, and she is ashamed of her parents who are living on the streets in New York. And that really just broke my heart, because I feel like that's kind of just reality sometimes, how children have to grow up and realize who their parents are, just human beings that are sometimes incapable of change and are just endlessly flawed. It happens. Not everyone gets that happily ever after at least not in the way that maybe their younger self pictured, because the happily ever after for her younger self would have been that glass castle. The next book that I read was about twin girls who were born to a Black mother and a white father in Georgia during the times of Jim Crow and segregation. So you can see why that may be an issue right off the bat. And to further explain why that's an issue, or give evidence as to the issue, the parents were killed by the locals while they were trying to leave town to go get married. So the white grandmother decided to take the white passing twin, while the Black grandmother took the more melanated twin, and they decided to raise them separately, of course. They weren't going to live in a plantation house altogether. So yes. Now, the book then fast forwards to the girls are now teenagers, and both grandmothers are on their deathbed. So now these girls find out that they have a sister, not just a sister, they have a twin. At the realization that not only does she have a twin, but she is, I can't say that, but she is black, mixed. She's mixed with black. She is now unable to see herself in the mirror, hence Mirror Girls. And I took this as kind of a metaphorical or symbolic representation of the fact that she no longer recognizes herself, which is why she is no longer able to see herself in the mirror, because she has no idea who she is. The book was an easy read because the vocab or verbiage wasn't too, I'm not gonna say it was simplistic because I feel like that may sound offensive, but I didn't have to like reread something to understand it. Everything just flowed nicely, and I was very fortunate that I found this book early on in my journey because it was also just a topic that I'm very into reading about, and the fact that it was kind of like this magical realism type of deal made it even more interesting. The next book or series of books that I read was the Cirque du Freak series. This was one of my favorite book series as a kid growing up because it was my brother's favorite, and most of the things that my older siblings did, I just immediately latched onto it. These books were fairly short, about 200 pages each. Actually, here. I also like how the spines spell out Cirque du Freak. I like that. But, so yeah, they were about 200 pages, sometimes more, sometimes less. This one's 183. But, the thing that I can't get it back now. Hold on. This book follows a young teenager, Darren Shan, who made the unforgivable mistake of stealing a Dwight Schrute made the unforgivable mistake of stealing a flute-trained spider from a centuries-old vampire, Mr. Krebsley. This spider ends up biting his best friend, Steve Leopard, and the only way to nullify his mistake is to agree to be Mr. Krebsley's half-vampire assistant. This decision made his best friend become his mortal enemy because Mr. Krebsley refused to turn Steve into a vampire first. Before Darren even agreed to this, Steve approached him, asked to be a vampire, and Mr. Krebsley tasted his blood and literally spit it out and said, "You have bad blood. I will not turn you. No one needs to turn you to a vampire. You are evil. You are the devil's spawn." So that pisses Steve off, and he vows to one day kill them both. So it follows the life of Darren Shan and Mr. Krebsley as they go through all these adventures and decades together while traveling with this band of very interesting humans, the Cirque du Freak. You know, there was love, there was loss, there was little people. Hardcat was one of my favorite characters ever. He's just so cute. He's just so cute. No, that's what was crazy. Like, finding out who Hardcat was, that blew my mind. That blew my mind. But you know, you had vampires, you had vampanese, you had trials of initiation, you had vampire princes, you had a freaking vampire vampanese war, which was crazy. But one of my favorite things about books, movies, TV shows is when the end connects all the way back to the beginning. And that's what this book did for me. And I'm glad that I finished it. I feel like that was a part of, like, not healing for my younger self, but I feel like my younger self wanted to finish those books and I did it. And so me as an adult, I got to do it. So that was just cool for me. The next book that I read was the Autobiography of an Ex-Colored Man. While I was reading this book, I was in this class called Racial and Ethnic Minorities, which I absolutely loved. And it encouraged me to want to do further research on my own. Well, further research and education. Education is research. Research is education. Whatever. It encouraged me to want to find more info about the things that I was learning about. I also think it's important to read books that came several decades before I, or maybe even my grandparents, were thought, because I feel like it's interesting to see how a lot of the passages that were written then can still correlate to some of the things that we're talking about now in 2024, as well as it just gives you a different perspective on how life was and how it can be if we continue to make if we continue to make the same decisions that we have made in the past, which is the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. But whatever. Cartman.
Here's Eric Cartman.
Whatever.
Anyway, sorry. God, my brain sometimes. But oh, I didn't bring my coffee over. Whatever. So while reading this book, before I even finished it, I knew that it was gonna go down as one of my favorite books just because of how raw it was. Like and the way that the story was able to really draw me in, because it got to the point where as you're following this, he was a young man, and you're just following him as he's trying to find his place in the world, and he's becoming more accepting and really flourishing in his skin as a black man. And you're just proud of him, you know, you're proud of him, you're happy for him, you're just waiting to see more. And just thinking about it now, like, my heart dropped, because sometimes I would get so lost in the story that I forgot about the title, you know, the autobiography of an ex-colored man. I knew that something traumatic had to have happened for this man to not only rid himself of his identity, but it was almost like killing yourself in a way. So the next book that I read was The Princess Saves Herself in This One, which is a book of poems. I wanted to read this because the title, because, you know, you always hear about the damsel in distress and the knight in shining armor, but no, the princess saves herself. So I just immediately was drawn to that. I've never read a book of poems before, so this was a first for me, but after this book, I know it won't be my last. The author gave you a glimpse into her pain, her discomfort, her trauma, and I feel like she gave you the space to be able to mirror some of your own thoughts, feelings, and emotions as well. The writing and the passages were very beautiful and candid, and also one of my favorite things was that some of the words were like pictures, like they formed pictures, which I thought was really cool to read. And also the cover, oh my gosh, this cover is so satisfying. Let's see if I can find one. No, this made me laugh, because on page 46 it says, "You were in love with the idea of me, not me." And I said, "You don't love me, you love the idea of me." Sarah Cameron, Outer Banks. I thought that was funny when I was reading it. So the next book that I read was The Wives, and this kind of began my unhinged female era, which is definitely one of my favorite tropes. I'm not sure if that's an official one, but I don't know. It's always kind of been my thing, you know. But I think it probably always will be. But this book was muy interesante because it follows the story of this woman named Thursday. I don't think her name is actually Thursday. I'm not gonna lie, that kind of confused me because she sees her husband on Thursday. So, but then I think also her father called her Thursday. So I was just very confused. It don't really matter, to be honest. It does not matter. But it follows this girl Thursday who only gets to see her husband on Thursday because he has other wives, hence the title, The Wives. So he tells her stories about them and, like, you know, gives her updates about them, but eventually his stories aren't enough. She wants to see them. She wants to befriend them. She wants to know what they offer her husband that she can't. So she ends up befriending one of the wives and maybe stalking a little bit. She stalks a little bit. And she realizes after, you know, discussing a few things with his wife that both of them possibly lost their children during pregnancy as a result of something that their husband purposely did. So now she's in a race against the clock because wife number 3 is currently pregnant. So now she's trying to save this wife from their deranged husband before he gets a chance to do what he did to the other 2. So meanwhile, husband, he's over here telling people she crazy, you know, I don't know what she's talking about. She my only wife, you know, she's delusional, blah, 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 blah. The ending to this book was, let's just say, stupid games win stupid prizes, and don't play with people's emotions. That's all I'm gonna say. There were some thoughts about this book and the book I'm going to talk about next, with people saying different things about them. I don't know. I'm not very like critical on books. Like every book that I've read, I have enjoyed so far. So I don't know. Maybe my bar is just set in hell. I don't know. Maybe once I get back into reading, and I've read different types of books, maybe that opinion will change. But yeah, I liked it. If you didn't like it, that's okay. If you liked it, cool. I just feel like sometimes people are a bit too like, why do you like that book? It's terrible. Like, some people like chocolate, some people like sour candy. Like, it's just a preference. You know, I don't tend to judge people about their preference unless it's like dangerous, you know, like, or you know. So like that's just me. That's just me. You like what you like, and I'm not gonna judge you for that. The next book that I read, which I already know what some people may say, but it was Verity by Colleen Hoover. This is the first and only book that I've read by Colleen. As I mentioned earlier in the video, I'm not really on social media, but the few times that I have fallen onto book talk while I was on TikTok, I saw everything that people said about Colleen. Not everything, but what popped up. And I liked the book. I thought it was interesting. I did watch a video of a girl, I think it was like, or a woman, or I watched a video of someone, a booktuber, and I thought it was funny, like everything she was saying, even though I didn't really agree with all of them. She did bring up some good points. I thought the book was interesting. It was a psychological thriller. So you have Verity, who is in a vegetative state after a supposed accident. You have her husband, and you have Lowen, the author that he hired in order to finish his wife's books. So this was kind of a live-in type situation, just because she had so many notes to go through. It just made sense for her to go to their house and stay for as long as it would take for her to get through all of the notes. So while going through all these notes, she finds another manuscript, a completely different manuscript that is almost like a manifesto type of deal, and it details how Verity possibly wanted to hurt her children, and maybe even did hurt her children. And the fact that their daughter, and he opened up to her about that, like when they first met, you know, that was kind of an interesting detail while reading this manuscript. By the end of this book, you're trying to figure out if anyone in this house is actually sane. I'm gonna go ahead and say probably not. Maybe the child, but considering who the child is around, I have a feeling that child might grow up to be a murderer. At the very least, a serial killer. So, yes. Check it out if you want. I don't know. So the next book that I decided to read was Luckiest Girl Alive, and I decided to read this because I saw a trailer when I was watching a YouTube video, and I saw that Mila Kunis was in it, and I saw that it was based off of a book, so I immediately stopped it and said I wanted to read the book first, because you know the book is better than the movie thing, which I agree with. So I decided to give it a try, and I didn't read the synopsis. I didn't finish watching the trailer, which is how I prefer to go into books. I don't like to read synopses because I feel like the shock factor is just like, you know, that's really just adds to the shock factor. Even though it doesn't always include spoilers, I feel like when you know absolutely nothing, you don't know the plot, you don't know the characters, you don't know nothing, everything that happens is a surprise. So it just makes it more fun for me. I reread that lunch scene, and if you've watched the movie or read the book, you'll know what I mean. I reread that passage maybe 5 times, because I was just like, what the f is happening? What is happening right now? What is happening right now? The second to last book that I read was Black Girls Must Die Exhausted, and it's following a black woman as she's trying her best not to die exhausted. At the beginning of the book, she finds out that her biological clock is ticking much faster than she thought, and if intervention isn't done soon, she may never be able to carry a child on her own, which is something that she really wants to do. For some, this book will literally have you looking around the room for hidden cameras, because this author is literally writing about your own life. And for other, it may be a way to metaphorically walk in a black woman's shoes through her experiences in America. There are times where I was laughing, I was crying, I I felt joy, I felt sadness, like my emotions were all over the place with this book in the best of ways though. So, the last book that I read, I had to sit on my hands because I couldn't stop moving them. But the last book that I read was The Invisible Man by H.G. Wells. This book was written in 1897. So I believe this may be the oldest book I've read, because I think the Autobiography was 1912. It begins with this mysterious, callous, bandaged man arriving in a little town. Unbeknownst to him, he arrives into a town with probably the noisiest locals you will ever find, which makes for an interesting story, because I feel like most of the events that happen wouldn't have happened if people would just mind their own business. Like, don't get me wrong, he was kind of rude, but like, mind your business, you know, just mind your business. I always say, and I've always heard since I was younger, it pays nothing to mind your own business, and I heavily agree with that. I'm actually currently reading The Invisible Man by Ellison, which is the same title but completely different concept. Like, this one by H.G. Wells was about a mad scientist who learned how to turn himself invisible, and the one by Richard Ellison is about a black man who feels invisible in America. So I may do like a little verses about that at some point, if I can make some shake with that, but we'll see. Yeah, well, that is all I have for today. Those were the 10 books that helped me get back into reading. As I mentioned, I would recommend all of these books that I read. I'll recommend all of the books that I've read, period. So this bottom shelf are the books, all the books that I've read. You can't really see it, my chair's blocking it. And all of those are the books I have to get to. So, yeah, I got a lot to keep me busy. But yeah, if you like this video, you can either give it a thumbs up and or leave me a comment down below. If you have any suggestions of books that you'd like for me to read, or if you've read any of these books and want to talk about them, you can leave a comment down below as well. And until next time, happy reading. Oh, hi, come here. Oh, he big boy. He big boy. Oh, you did so good. You being big boy. Oh, I love you, my buddy.